Welcome to the In Love with PMDD podcast. I am your host, Dr. Rose, your PMDD relationship psychotraumatologist, and I help you stop the monthly PMDD breakups. PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It is in approximately 1 in 5 women, and it makes you want to break up with your partner approximately 1 to 2 weeks before your period every single month. So as someone who has suffered with PMDD for over 18 years, I dedicated my doctorate practice to helping partners navigate those monthly PMDD breakups with everything from attachment styles, triggers, sensitivity to noise, sensitivity to touch, all of the things that you really struggle with when you're in PMDD. And I also dedicated my dissertation to a phenomenological study of the relationship experiences of partners of individuals who suffer with premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So I'm not just here to help the sufferer, the one who is suffering with PMDD. I am here for the partners as well. So if you need those private sessions, make sure you go to inlovewithpmdd.com and get those tools. So let's get into this week's PMDD trauma transformational tools that is going to help you stop the monthly breakups and stop the suffering and stress in your PMDD relationship. Let's get into it. Okay, welcome to another episode of the In Love with PMDD podcast. Today I have a lovely guest and I have Shuk here with me, and she's going to be sharing a lot of her experiences with having PMDD and relationships and balancing careers and all of these things that I know really just impacts us on a day-to-day basis. So Shuk, thank you and welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much. Should I call you Dr. Rose?
Yeah.
Rose?
Yeah.
Dr. Rose. I mean, what a beautiful and loving, perfect name for you. I've been so aware of you, just been following you on social media, and I find your vulnerability and your insight and wisdom and perspectives to just be so not only educational, but comforting. And I've always really connected with you online. So I'm so happy to be here with you now.
Thank you. So tell me a little bit about your journey with PMDD. How long have you known that you've had it? And how has it really impacted your relationships in the past?
Oh my gosh, how hasn't it? I'm 42 years old now. I was diagnosed officially in 2000. I want to say 16. But certainly it's something that, yeah, as you know, even long before diagnosis, I was certainly feeling all of the effects of it. And I have found that it really does affect every facet of my life, from work to relationships, but relationships, not just romantically. I find that it affects and attacks. The word attacks is coming up for me so much when I think of relationship, because it has attacked every relationship in my life. And, I've done a lot of work and I think about this stuff so much of like which relationships it attacks more. And unfortunately, it seems to be all of the ones that are closest to me. So, it's been a long time. And then in work, again, it boils down to relationship, because I think I'm an actress and I'm a writer. And, when I'm writing, I'm here alone and I can, fall into these worlds and create characters, and the relationships I have with characters that I'm creating are very healthy. But then when I need to bring that work to other people, or if I'm on set and I happen to be shooting during a luteal phase, I have to be so conscious of my thought patterns and work against them. And, many times it's ended up with me leaving set and, having complete breakdowns and in the car on the way back to my house or hotel or whatever it is, because I've been suffering so much internally, battling thoughts of how I'm being received by the people around me that I've built relationship with, whether it's there or not. Anyway, I'm rambling. I'm so excited to talk to you. I think you get it. It's such an internal battle for us. A few people are slowly revealing. Like now I have 2 people that are kind of, in my circle adjacent that have come to me and been like, I'm suffering from this too. But beyond that, nobody really, there's no one close to me that knows about it. So I don't get to talk about it all the time, nor do I choose to, because I think it's actually sounds very scary what we go through. I'm rambling.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It feels scary a lot of times. And I don't think you ever really get used to it. I know every single month that I go into PMDD and I get the symptoms. And one of the things that lets me know that I'm in PMDD is I wake up with night sweats. So I literally wake up drenched and it feels like a scary movie. Like every single time,
Yeah.
it's like I never get used to it. And then having, the anxiety and the heart palpitations and all of that just rush in. And I love that word that you use where you said attack, because that's what it feels like. It feels like you're fine. I get like completely calm and I'm so happy. And it's almost like I go in this really big high when I'm in my follicular phase. And then as soon as I go into PMDD, I feel attacked. I feel like everything is just coming at me all at once. And
Yeah.
it takes me a minute to just recognize, okay, I'm back in this space. I'm back here. It's happening again. But it just, you never really get used to it.
No, and the severity always varies, you know, so
Yeah.
you don't know when it's going to be intense. I just had a really hard, um, on January 1st, I
Mhm.
was starting my period later in that day, but I had made some mistakes leading up to it. So I was in luteal and I had drinks on New Year's Eve. You know,
Yeah.
it's New Year's
Yeah.
Eve, and
Yeah.
I was feeling so anxious, and I was going to see people that I love dearly, and it was a small group. I knew that that was the right way to do it, and these are
Yeah.
people that love and support me, but I was so anxious about being around them, people that
Yeah.
love me so much that I have no reason to be anxious around. And I was anxious about the idea of having to make conversation and having to just be present, which I knew was going to be hard to do. And I told myself, like, just don't drink tonight, you know.
Yeah.
Diet
Yeah.
Coke. I was like, oh, Diet Coke. I'm so
Yeah.
excited about my Diet Coke. And then I get in the room and immediately I was so uncomfortable. And I was like, oh my gosh, these people that love me, they feel like strangers to me. And I don't want them to feel that because it's my brain. It's not true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And somebody offered me a martini and I was like, you know what, that'll probably take the edge off. So I had a martini. And then I was like, martini makes me feel better. And then I just kept, and then I had another one and whatever. And I had a few. And then in the morning, I made my second mistake. I was still feeling very anxious. I was a bit hungover and I had coffee and I don't drink coffee, but they offered me coffee and I didn't want to, I just wanted to keep like
Yeah.
trying to socially be functional. And I took a coffee later that day, we went to a very public like place to go to the movies and we were sitting for dinner and I had a full-blown panic attack on the level
Oh,
of a panic attack that I have never had before. And they had to call an ambulance and the ambulance had to come. And like, this was just just January 1st, 2024. I was
yeah.
like,
Starting the year off. You're like,
yeah, I was like, this year I'm good. And I was feeling in control and I've been doing so well. And then that happens. And then I don't know if you feel this too, but then going into like menstrual and follicular, you said something online and I was like, oh my gosh, I identify with that so much. I went into a complete numbness.
yeah.
Like it's as if, and I think I said this too specifically, after that happened, it was just another indicator of, I'm going to go through this until
Yeah.
I go through menopause and, like it crushed me. And I understood that so much with what you were saying of like, it's such a wild state to be in because my soul gave up. Like I felt finished. I just felt done. And it took me about a week and a half before I got on the other side of it. And I'm so happy that this is in line for us to speak today. I don't know where you're at in your cycle, but I know you're going through so much.
Ugh.
And, ah, um, but because this is lined up, I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to have a clear conversation with Dr.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm actually in my follicular days. Well, I'm I'm in ovulation. I'm on day 2 or 3 ovulation. So for me, my ovulation are my best days. I know a lot of people
Road.
have, yeah, some people have symptoms. I have private clients where they have symptoms, and I can't specifically relate to that because during ovulation, I feel so open. I feel so free. I feel so happy. I feel like myself. And that's why when PMDD comes right after that, it's like the big drop because it's almost like
Right.
I'm so hopeful too. Like I'll make a full on plan. I'm like, oh, this month I got this. Like and then my PMDD sort of trickles in. Like it doesn't start off super intense. Like it's a shock because it's something negative that's happening, but it's not fully intense. So it's
Mhm.
almost like as the days go on, it gets worse and worse and worse. And my
Yeah.
hope like for the plan that I made in my ovulation, it's like goes down and I'm like, no. And I'm like fighting it like, no. Like this is supposed to
Yeah.
work.
It's
Yeah.
wild. I've identified that 10 days out on the 10th day before my period comes,
Yeah.
that's my worst day. And I think
Oh,
that I think that me naming that day, and it's a true day, like sometimes I'll just be like, this is it. Like it's when my ideation comes in and like when
yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's funny. I just imagined slitting my wrist, like I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
what day is it? And then I look at the calendar and I'm like, okay, great. So now it's as if my brain has helped to, I don't know how to explain this. It feels a little bit like magic, to be honest with you. But since I've identified the 10th day as the worst day, it's as if things are working in my favor to try to make that just the worst day. Because then I can use that as my low bar and it's just one day that I need to get through. And obviously it doesn't negate the struggles of every single other day, but it at least
Yeah.
gives me a day where I'm like, okay, all of the worst of it, just land here. And then I can be a bit more functional. And that day I'm not functional at all.
I love that number one, you are labeling it where you're giving yourself permission to have that worst day. I know a lot of times people think that, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Earlier, I remember with my ex-PMDD partner, he would try to tell me, oh, just pretend like I think it's all in your mind. Just pretend like you don't have PMDD and then maybe it won't show up. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, so I was like, at this point, you get desperate. So I'm like, all right, I'll play that role. I'll just pretend like I'm a person that
Yeah.
doesn't have CBD. And so when the symptoms start coming, it's like, no, it's like, no. I was in this state of denial. And he was like, just don't say that you're in PMDD and then maybe it won't happen. And so it's like, it's when it still happened, like for the outside person that doesn't have PMDD, that may seem like a thing that works where if you don't speak it into existence, then maybe it doesn't come, like the law of attraction, what you speak,
Mhm.
calling it in. But
Yeah.
for us, I love what you said. It's going to come regardless. Like whether I pretend, whether I don't pretend, whether I act, whether I don't act, it's still going to come. And I think just that level of acceptance of
Mhm.
like the 10th day is my day. I'm not going to schedule things on this day. I'm not going to try to pretend like I'm feeling great when I know that I'm not going to, and just giving yourself that day versus saying this 2 weeks, because I love that you gave it
Yeah.
one day instead of 14 days, which is,
And yeah, and the 14 days still come and there's
yeah,
variations, but I'm like, this day I need to be allowed one day where
yes.
I'm like, I'm a puddle or whatever. And I think like, oh my gosh, I have so much to say about what you just said. Um, um, that behavior of trying to pretend it away, I think that does work with a lot of things. I think like to maintain a functional life with other, ailments, I'll call them, and
Mhm.
as general, I think
Yeah.
that can work. I think that the real trouble with PMDD, especially in romantic relationship, is that when we pretend it away, at least for me, I've found that it'll take its vengeance and put it on other people. And then I'll suddenly be like, oh, you're the problem. Oh,
Yeah.
it's not my issue because I'm pretending I'm fine. And yet you're still awful. But then, you get through luteal and they're like, they're not awful at all. They're trying to take care of you or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and that was always the hardest thing for me in romantic relationship was to not believe, like it was just so hard to see the truth because
Mhm.
I know like now out of relationship and I'm trying to balance it, but I see it even with friends and people I'm working with, where I will start to question their everything. And now, because I can take distance and I can be alone and I can shut off when I need to, rather than having somebody there where my filter is so shifted that I often am like, I don't know, it makes it almost easier to be like, oh, they're bad. It's not
Yeah.
PMDD or something.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm being clear, but it's just such a, that's why I love what you do so much, and speaking about it so specifically in relationship, it's just where I find it's the most treacherous or something. Like my sister once, this, and I hope she doesn't listen to this, but I hope she also understands that I understand what she meant. But
Yeah.
I had taken, I was in and out of relationships for years and years. And then I met this really nice man, and he was like a golden retriever nice. And there's part of me that really actually believes that we can all use a nurse. People with PMDD, we can kind of use a partner that's that has that nurturing nurse kind of quality, where it's somebody that would be happy to cook a meal for you when you need it. Like I often feel like I need help. Like I feel like I don't have it, but
Yeah.
some days where I'm crying and I just couldn't eat. And I'm like, if I just had somebody to, take care of me or whatever. Anyway, so he was just this sweet angel of a guy. Um, and I had taken him home to meet the family, and I overheard my sister say to him, I know she's really hard to love. And I understand what she means, because because of how many boundaries I set, because I need to sometimes, I can't answer them. So I can't talk to
Yeah.
people I'm in a relationship with sometimes, because I'm paranoid. Like I'm just completely
Yeah.
paranoid for those days. And so it's better for me to not talk to them. But then what if they need me in those times? Like it's just so complicated. And oh my gosh, I went off on a tangent. I think I feel a little bit vulnerable for saying that about what my sister said, but I also like, it's such a clinch pin for me, because I think about that a lot, and I think of how true that must be of how it is to love us, and yet how much we deserve to be loved and need to be loved. I'm rambling.
No, I think that's perfect. And something that you said really came up for me that I really can relate to. And that's having a little bit of guilt. Well, I had a lot of guilt about the boundaries that I was setting with my ex-PMDD partner. He really had an issue with some of the things that, like, I was single for 2 years before I went with him and got married and all the things. And I took that space and time intentionally to figure out what is it that I need when I go into PMDD versus when I'm in my follicular days. Like I took time to figure myself out without trying to still pour into somebody else at the same time, because that's what I was doing before, where I was trying to figure myself out while I was in a relationship. So then every time I would figure something out, I would like get triggered by them interrupting me figuring myself out. And so I was like, you know what? Let me just take this space and time. And one of the things that I developed was my PMDD partners, my morning routine. And it was this ritual that I had every single morning. And I was like, this is what I need to clear, because I would wake up feeling negative for no reason. And so if you came into my space, I would immediately say that you're the reason that I'm feeling negative, because I'm thinking it's you, I'm projecting it on you. But what I did within this morning routine is I eliminate the negativity that I feel within myself, so that by the time I'm contacting you, I'm connecting with you, then I'm not blaming you for anything, because I'm in a better space. So I blocked off that time. And for me, it's like, it can go from 60 to 90 minutes, because I had to time it, because he started to ask me, well, how long are you going to be doing this? And I'm like, I don't know. I've never had to time myself. Like, just whenever I'm done, I'm done.
Yeah.
And he had such an issue with it. And so I felt guilty about having that boundary of, I don't text you, I don't call you, I don't do anything until I'm done with my morning routine. And I did it as a way of protecting my ex-PMDD partner from that negative side of me, because I didn't want him to have to pay for what it is that I was going through, or for me to blame him. But I did have a lot of guilt around him literally saying, I don't want you to have this boundary. And then I knew that I had to have that boundary. So I was in this very tricky place where I was like, okay, let me just let me not have the morning routine. And that was the biggest mistake
Oh,
I
yeah.
could have made, is because I took that boundary away. And then there was so much bitterness and resentment that I had towards him because I was now suffering in the morning. Like I was like suffering in silence, but then he was happy. So then I
Right.
had to choose, like, do I take it away and make him happy, but then I suffer, or do I cause him to suffer by having that boundary? And I was like, do I choose myself or do I choose my partner?
And then we need to know, like, that's not, like, let's look at that on paper. You taking 90 minutes shouldn't hurt anybody. That's not a hurtful thing to do. So that's, everyone in every mental state can see that. Him
Mhm.
needing you to say, how long exactly are you going to be gone? That's fair. I think that's, and that's a great lesson to learn. But oh, yeah, I feel that so, so, so much.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of like, I think that as a community, we need to, I think it's just so key. Like you taking those 2 years to identify your boundaries. I don't know how else we would function. And then stuff comes up in relationship. Like I have a real sensitivity towards like being, well, I don't know. It's just every relationship it attacks. So if I'm, meeting new people, I find it takes about 3 months and then I get paranoid about them during, you know, um, luteal phase. So
Yeah.
we make friends as a couple and then I'm like, okay, great. We've made friends. Like these are great people. Oh, we both like
Yeah.
them. We like them. We like them. Who are they? Who are they? You know? And then I'll be like at the dinner, but those are some of my boundaries where I'm like, I can't go to dinner with people this week. Like I can't
Yeah.
do
And I
that.
think
Yeah,
it's
our
so
boundaries are so
important
big.
that you know what your thing is, because every private client I has something different. Some have rejection sensitivity where they're consistently thinking that the other person is rejecting them, or the friends, or you like you said, if you go on a date night or something and you're with other couples, they're thinking that the other people are thinking something about them, and so they're feeling rejected. And so, because you know that you have that paranoia during that time, you can choose to set that boundary. But a lot of people don't really take the time to understand what their thing is. And your thing could change over the years. Like if you've done work on yourself in certain areas, you can, like, maybe you won't have paranoia, but you'll have something else. And I feel like PMDD will just rotate. It'll always be
Yeah.
something that's like, oh, I'm cured from this, or I don't have this anymore, but now I have this. Like it's always something, but it's just a matter of being in that place of being self-aware to really figure out what that thing is. But without that time alone, you can't really discover that without going through that discovery process.
Yeah. Can I ask, and I know that you're far from this idea now, but how did you, like, what's the advice that you give um, for people getting into relationship? Like I said, for me, it's like, I, it's hard because, you're developing this thing within a new relationship and I don't want to talk to them. I'm so tired and maybe I'm also just old, at 42, like maybe I'm just like, oh, I can't, but dating, it's such a, have you touched on that a lot on dating and like what it takes to get
Yeah, so
there?
I just was getting into that. Actually, that's going to be the next program that I do. It's going to be
Okay.
dating with PMDD, because I remember so many people were asking me about it, and I don't think I was in that place, because I was like trying to rewind. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
but now I'm forced into this place because I now have to think about that for myself. But I remember the advice that I always give is, the biggest question is, when do I tell the person that I have PMDD? That's always the biggest thing. Like, do I immediately go on the first date and I say, oh, nice to meet you, I have PMDD? You know what I mean? And I always say, no, we're not telling them
Yeah.
immediately. Because number one, you don't want to scare them away. But number two, you want to know how that person impacts you, because every individual, believe it or not, is going to impact you differently in PMDD. You can date 4 or 5 different people and they're going to impact you 4 or 5 different ways when you go into your luteal phase. And I always say, make sure that you understand how they're triggering you. They're going to trigger you. They
Interesting.
are going to trigger you. So
Yes,
number
they
one, just
are.
Just understand that and don't think that they're the wrong person because they triggered
Mm.
you. That doesn't mean that they're the wrong person. It's just a matter of understanding, okay, how do they trigger you? And then what kind of place are you in that particular area? Do they trigger your PMDD rage? And that's something that you're really trying to work on where you haven't really mastered it, you don't know how to navigate it, then I would say, okay, maybe that's not the right person for you right now. But if they trigger intrusive thoughts and you already know that you have those barriers around paranoia, but they trigger your intrusive thought, you know you can manage that because you put that barrier up where you can go to them and say, hey, I really like you or whatever, but during this period of time, I limit communication for this. If you want to tell them it's because of PMDD, that's fine. If you want to tell them because you have a lot going on or whatever it is you want to say, so that you can continue to get to know them and see if they fit into the other areas of your life. Like, you don't want to compartmentalize and say, because they trigger you in this area, throw away everything else, throw away the whole person, because they may be perfect for you in all of those other areas of your life. This may be the area that you and that person just have to work through in your relationship, but it is something that you can work through.
I'll give you a round. That was amazing. Yeah. That makes me emotional. That's beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
Good.
And I think you've already said it. I mean, and even with you, you're saying that I think that, people with PMDD need someone that's very nurturing. You're really calling out what it is that you're calling in. You're putting a label on what it is that you're wanting because you've seen it. You've had that person that was very nurturing towards you. And you're like, that's what I need. Whereas someone else may say, oh, I don't want someone like that. I want someone that's like, for me, I need someone that's busy. And the reason why I need someone that's busy, meaning they have their own passion, they have their own hobby, they have their own career, so that when I need to take space, that they're not damaged by it, right?
Yeah,
I'm not
I
hurting you.
feel you a big time. I want both of those things. I want them to be like, oh, and then be like,
Yes.
I need a real 360.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think just coming to terms with what it is that you want and just mapping it out, really writing it out and making like a vision, and not just writing it out with words. I know you're a writer, so you can probably descriptively write and describe. And I would say use your talent, because you're an actress and a writer. You can use that to create literally like a storyline of what is a day. I always say, I use this with a private client, a day in the life. And I want you to write out what a day in the life with your PMDD partner, with your ideal PMDD partner looks like from the time you wake up to the time that you go to bed. So where when you're in your luteal phase, what does it look like? And when you put that on paper and envision that, you know who to call in.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. It's so funny. I have so many journals. I'm sure you do too.
Yes, I do too. Yeah.
Stacks of journals. And it's like the one things that I'm Canadian and I've like brought over the kid journals and then brought them, like they've come everywhere I've gone. So I just have stacks and stacks. But I happened upon one the other day and I was flipping through it and I love reading old stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, just as a side story, my mom, who I believe was undiagnosed PMDD, and that sweet thing, to her roller coaster that she went on, but she told me once that she burned all of hers, that she read them and couldn't believe like how her mind worked. And I'm like, oh, that's so fascinating because I can face mine because I know what's happening to her, to young me. Anyway, I found one and there happened to be one where I like wrote down a day, and it wasn't this beautiful idea of what you're saying of doing it specifically in luteal and like what does your hardest day look like in a day in the life? That's so smart. But mine was like, I wake up, I have 2 children, he leaves me in bed while he works out and I watch, like just like crazy. And now most days I'm like, rip out my ovaries. I can't stand them. But but yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So you're open to dating right now, or are you still in the place where you're good with taking space?
I've been feeling particularly lonely lately. I've definitely I feel like there's so much up in the air in my life. In my career, things just pandemic was super hard on everyone. I
Yeah.
went through a breakup at that time. So my therapist passed away. He was 96 when he
No.
died, and I was with him through the end of his life. And so when he passed, there was just so much stuff. And then, I hadn't been working, so I had to move out of that place. I went home for a few months. That was really traumatic. I then came back here, and I have really wonderful people around me, and they gave me this really beautiful place to stay while, I got my feet on the ground
Yeah.
because in my right mind, it's because they believe in me and they know how my career is destined to go, I'll say.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then the strike hit. So another year passed where
Oh,
I again
yeah.
didn't get to really work. And now that's all done, but I'm in a place where I need work. I'm, financially in a bit of a bind, um, and I'm moving out of my place in May. So I'm like, wow, this is going to
Going
be
through a lot.
a lot. This is going to be a lot, which also goes back to my January 1st panic attack. Like, I was just like, this all makes complete sense.
Yeah.
My body is like, oh fuck, because excuse me for swearing, but my body is just like, woo. And me, as you know, I'm like, this is going to be a really, really important time for me to stay as stable and as peaceful as possible to maintain my healthiest version of my PMDD mind state. So,
Yeah.
having said all of that, yes, I'm waking up wishing I had a partner to go through it all with, but also, you can tell me it's pretty blatantly probably not the best time to bring in a partner. Um, you know, but
I don't know. I think, sometimes when we go into
I feel like
dating,
crying. What's
no,
happening? Every time I'm like, here's the truth about my life, I feel like sobbing.
it is so normal. It's very normal. It's very therapeutic to just be really open and real and honest about where you are in that space and really just saying this is where I am, just exposing yourself and this is where I'm at, and
Yeah.
ideally maybe you want to be in a different place, but to just be honest with yourself and say, this is where I am, this is what I want. And sometimes when you're laying your situation out there and you're saying, so because I'm going through all of this is probably not a good time to date. I don't know. I probably think that if someone came in, they could immediately show you the qualities that they had to fit in those places in your life where you would need them the most right now. And I
You're
think that
saying
you're
like a rich like prince.
I just came off of the Christmas season. I love watching the Hallmark movies. So I was really like, I can't believe I'm going through a breakup during the Hallmark season. Like, no, like, because all of them, I'm like, I
Honestly.
could just go to that winery out in the country or like, or go to that farm with that, that person that's in the hay that
Oh
really
yeah.
owns the whole thing. And he's just
Oh, I know but he chooses to lift the veils. He chooses, even though he doesn't have to.
oh my goodness. I literally could like cut my face out and put it on all those people. And I was like, this is not good. And I was in PMDD watching it all. And I was just thinking about, you know, just the life, because you envision the life that you have with someone when you're in that relationship. And then when you're going through really hard times, it was the weirdest thing where I was going through so much in a big transition, like you were saying. And I did want to be comforted. I did feel like, even though it was my breakup, I was like, I really need help with this because it made me feel lonelier than
Yeah.
usual. And like, I'm not a person that is easily lonely. Like I
Me
have a lot
neither.
going on, but I just felt like I'm in this season of
Yeah.
intense loneliness where the gap is very obvious. Like, it's like, I can't ignore it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just in my face where I'm waking up and I'm putting, I wish I had someone to do this with. I wish I had someone to do this with. I'm going to and I see couples all around. Like, I'm like, I see everybody holding hands and, I'm out of town on doing a conference, but I went to go eat and I was like, oh, I'll just sit at the bar, because I don't want to sit like table for one. So I
Yeah.
sat there and then even there were couples at the bar just talking and I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's very obvious that we need people. I think PMDD relationships are hard, but I don't think we're meant to do life alone. Like I really believe that, especially with having PMDD.
That's all so beautiful, and oh, I know that feeling of watching. I have so many great couples around me that really
Mhm.
love each other, like just such wonderful examples. And what I just find so tricky is that do you find that your PMDD makes you like go through those phases of not wanting to talk to anyone and like not wanting to like I feel so like I can't function. I think maybe maybe there's something about this little season that I'm in, but I also feel a lot of shame. I feel that feeling of I'm sorry, I'm your friend kind of thing, like which is I know it's ridiculous, but I just, I have this feeling of yes, I know we need people and I want people, but then I also there's part of my brain, the reptile part or whatever we want to call it, that's like it's probably better for them if you don't. Which
But
is
when you're feeling
really
that
hard.
shame, what are you doing with it? Like, are you just internalizing it, or are you actually saying something to the person that you're
No, I've
thinking that
stopped
about?
saying things to the people. I've
Yeah,
stopped because I think that part of me is just like, what am I every month going to be like? Hi, my brain is telling me again that you don't need me. Oh, hello again. My brain is again telling me that you don't.
so
So
you feel like it's a burden for them for you to keep bringing it up.
I think it gets back down to that hard to love thing. I think that my worst fear is to be too hard to love. And so, and again, this isn't all the time and
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah, yeah.
understand it more than anyone. But yeah, I guess I don't know why I said that.
No,
Maybe
but do you think that's why that comment that your sister made was so hurtful? Because that's almost like it mirrored what you were
I just
already
think it's
thinking.
true. I think
Yeah, exactly. We
I just
always
think
get
it's true.
hurt. We get hurt by the comments that are most in alignment with what we really believe. And then it's almost hurtful because we're like, oh my gosh, not only do I believe it, but somebody else can see it too, like on
Yeah.
the outside. And it's a scary, it's like, so it must be real, you know, because now
Yeah.
they can see it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But I mean, the brass tacks is, I completely agree. And I love the sentiment that it is possible to find someone who would want to.
Yeah,
And
yeah, because I love that you
I'm
said that because you
yeah,
said not just that they can, but they would actually want to, because that's what we want. We want someone that wants to love us in that way, not that they have to, not like we're a burden and they love you, but they're like, oh, I would just put up with her when she
yeah,
gets into PMDD because I'd like, I love who she is in the follicular phase. Like we want to feel like that person wants to be there for us in all seasons of our cycle.
yeah, yeah. And they do, especially the ones that's always funny to me when do you find that your mind ever attacks like other relationships in your life, like friendships or like do your friendships kind of get some of this as well?
Yes, my friendships definitely do. And that's why my circle is so small. Like, I think people assume that it's bigger than it is. I'm like, I really have like a couple of people, like on one hand, because I'm like you, where I don't want to consistently have to explain the state that I'm in. And I want to be I'm a very all or nothing type of person where if I'm your friend, like I'm completely open with you. I'm telling you everything. Like if I'm feeling a certain way, I'm telling you, but I also want you to like know me. And I don't want to have to like so a lot of my friends they're like, I already know. Like, so I don't have to go back into it and start from the beginning and say,
Totally.
hey, they just understand. Okay, bro, I know that you're in PMDD, like I know whatever, but yeah, it definitely trickles to my friends, and they know like when to just because sometimes we'll have disagreements over topics. Like I think I start caring about things more than I normally would when I'm in PMDD. Like I all of a sudden I'm an advocate for these things that they're like, and I'm like, no, that's not true. I've almost played devil's advocate, and they're like, well, yeah, it is because of this and this and this. And then they're like, you know what? It's fine. Like, I'm going to let you have this one. And they just let it go because they know I get into that like combative, argumentative kind of place where it's really, when I think about it, I'm like, I don't even care about that. Like, I don't care about, like my best friend was like, oh, I'm gonna, take my teenage son's like cell phone away, and because of this and this. And I was like, well, why would you do that? He still needs to have something to self-soothe him. Like, I was just going in, and she's like, but yeah.
Right.
And so she's like explaining it, so now I'm just like, oh my gosh. And like I get into my follicular thing, I'm like, why did I even care about the cell phone? Like, it didn't even
Yeah,
impact me.
totally. I totally feel you. I get that. That's when I'm like, one of my mantras is like, let them.
Yes.
Them. I love that. I don't remember who said it or what.
Mel Robbins said that.
Mel
Mel Robbins with
Robbins.
the let them theory. And I was like, what a genius. Like,
What a genius, honestly, especially for us, because it's helped me so much in especially friendship relationships, because I have friends that we've been friends for like, 10, 15 years. And they're like, and it's like you, I have a very small group. And so then all of a sudden they'll be like, oh my gosh, they didn't invite me to the thing and like they whatever. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Who cares? Like they couldn't or they didn't. And I'll be like, oh, they didn't because, my eye does that thing when I'm in conversation and, they're embarrassed by me and I'm a failure, whatever. And now with this, like, let them. If she needs
yeah.
to be closer to her other mom friends, let her. Like they'll come around, And so
Yeah.
I found that
And
that
and a
helpful.
lot of the things what I've learned with the let them theory is a lot of the things that I'm letting them do, they're not really doing. Like in my mind, I'm
Yeah.
letting them, I'm like, I'm letting them be rude to me. I'm letting them maliciously do this. But in reality, outside of PMDD, they're not even really doing it. So I'm just letting myself let them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what like a great kind of savior, because in that same theory, it's like let them and then let it go. So exactly. It's like it's not something I need to talk to her about later. It's nothing like that. If there's an issue, they will bring it up, like
Mhm.
that's definitely a big one. But then also on the other side of it, I think again back to romantic relationships. That's where I was always like, and I thought I was doing great in my last one, and it lasted a year and a half. He ended up being a crazy person, but where I was doing a good job of evaluating what I needed to bring up and what
Mhm.
needed to be addressed and what didn't.
Perfect.
Like
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
time and clearly from listening to you, it's exactly what you were doing. You were
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to let it go through two phases to make sure
Hmm.
that this is actually an issue that I need to communicate or
Yes.
correct or work
Yes.
on. And that's such a big one, I think, for everyone in our state to like really like give yourself the time to assess.
Yeah, and I think giving time is so hard because when we get into PMDD, especially when we have a lot of anxiety, we feel like we need to do something about it right
It's
now.
an
Like,
emergency.
yeah, we're like, I need to
Yeah.
say something. I understand. I'm like, give it a minute because a lot of my tools, it's like with the PMDD pivot, where you're having to really pivot on not taking immediate action to what it
Mhm.
is that you're thinking and feeling. Give it a moment and let's choose a tool that's going to relate to what you're feeling. But PMDD wants you to just explode and just immediately go and say that thing, immediately go and do that thing. But then what happens is you experience all of this guilt after that because you get it all out. And then you think back to what you said and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. Or, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. And then you can't really take it back. So then you go and you're shaming yourself and you're in this place that it takes you a while to get out of it because it's accompanied by so many intrusive thoughts that just make you feel so bad about yourself. And so what the pivot does is I try to help people not get to that point. Like if you just pivot and pause before you do that, then you can get rid of all of these other symptoms that you're going to have afterwards.
Brilliant. So smart. So smart. I think like now I told you about the panic attack I had. I did some good pivots, like I did
Good.
great because it was so like the visual of it was just so great. We were like in this public farmers market area. You have to tell me when you have to get off.
No, you're good.
Okay, good. But we were in this like public area and I was with somebody who's in a lot of movies, so he's very recognizable, and his wife and our other friend. And I think that probably was adding to my insanity because people were already just naturally, which we go through all the time, and I never care. I'm always like, yes, but this day I was like, oh God. Anyway, and so then that's what this panic attack was. It was 1,000 intrusive thoughts happening at once. It was being in public, and as my hands went tight. I like couldn't move my hands. I thought I was going to die. It was like a real panic situation.
Yeah.
And I did so good. And I was like, I closed my eyes and I was just like, please calm down. Like something's wrong. But then I was like, music. And I made them hold up a phone to my ear playing classical music because I know that it drowns out my thoughts and calms down my brain. So there was one great pivot that I did. And then on the way, they're like, I'm like crumped up like this, holding the phone with music playing. These giant men had to like lift me onto the stretcher in like seated position. And I'm like holding the phone with the music playing. And so it's like blaring classical music while there was just crowds of thousands of people like eating their food and I'm being rolled out. So I can immediately pivot into how funny that is. Thank goodness,
Yeah.
And as I was calming down and I come to in the back of the ambulance, now the crowds are gone and everyone's gone. And I look up and the paramedic was really handsome. And so I pivoted right to that. And I love to joke. So I was immediately like, did you have the prerequisite that you had to be hot? So I start hitting on the young paramedics. So that pivoted. But what's happened after is that the things that I didn't pivot on, the things that I think I've been feeling guilt about, the fact that, I'm needing help financially right now and all of those things that all truncated and me coming back, like I'm scared, still very uncomfortable facing my friends because they're not, it's not a place where I'm like, hello, everyone, let's sit down and have a speech about what exactly is happening in my mind. It's just not the space for it. And so, I love the pivot theory so much, but also I'm so proud of myself for recognizing just what's happening. And I think that for all of us, that is just really what we have right now while they're still figuring out, hopefully really trying to figure out how to help us correct this. I think that awareness, I know that you preach this as well, is like, I know what's happening. And that has saved my sanity more than anything else.
Oh, I love that. So is there anything else that you want to really uncover about dating specifically before we go? Because I know that's a space that not only you're in, but I am fully aware that there's so many other people that are suffering with PMDD, and then even, individuals that learned about PMDD that are just joining the podcast just to get information about how to be like a good PMDD partner, so like how to be there and to support us, how we, need to be supported.
Yeah. I think, I often will lean on the idea of like, hey, I could just be alone. Like it's easier for me to be alone. And I think that is a really wrong way to think. And I think, of course, it's okay to end up not in romantic relationship too. I think that that's a fine way to live. But I also do, as you said earlier, I think a big thing for me that I want to move forward, and I know that your listeners will need to hear this too, is that it is worth doing the work to have that. It does add something, and I can see it from all perspectives. And if you want that, and if you have even the smallest, seed of wanting to have love, it's worth going for it entirely. And, I think that that's the inspiration that I'm getting just from sitting here with you right now is, I've gone a lot of years of being like, I'm fine. It'll be fine. And the older I get, I'm like, no, you really would love to have somebody to wake up to. And you really would love to have somebody to care about you. So I think that that's a big point that you're on that I think will really resonate with a lot of people. Like while you're in it, I think it will feel easy to give up or like it'll just be easier alone. And it is, it's easy to isolate, but it's also ultimately not the full way to live, I guess. I think is kind of what you've done without me asking you. It's just for you to be like, is it worth it? You know?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think that's beautiful. And I just want to thank you for your openness, for your vulnerability, for even reaching out, for wanting to speak on this, because I think I know how hard it is to speak on something that you're presently going through, like in the moment live. It's easier to like look back on things and say, oh, back in the day, I went through this. But when you're speaking on things as you're going through them, I think that that's where the strength is. And I just really appreciate it. And I'm glad you're in your follicular days. You're in your good days?
Yeah.
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 This is perfect timing.
I know.
I'm like,
I know. I think we're synced. I think we're synced. When did you start your period this month?
let me look at my tracker right
I
now
bet it was the first or second.
because I know you know what? I think it was. So I'm like, no, because I was thinking about, where was I? Okay, yeah, let me look for the last one.
Because it would be interesting. I always like this is what I told you before we got on. Like I want I want to do a documentary on this, and I think a lot about getting a hysterectomy and whether that's right for me or not or whatever. And sometimes I do want it, but I want to like where are the scientists? I want to do a documentary where I'm hooked up to machines and you can study, our brains very clearly through the month and like because I know you and wait, what was the date? Did you find
The
it?
2nd of January.
Yeah. No wonder I was brave enough to reach out. No wonder you felt solid to reach back. Like, again, it all just makes sense.
And I was like, oh, I can do it this day. Like I was ready. Yeah, yeah. Oh my
But
gosh.
yes, like how different. This is what fascinates me too, and I think which is what would fascinate the world. And we need them to be invested so that we can, women in general,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are not to be taken care of properly. But like how different would this conversation be if you and I were both in luteal,
Oh my God.
right? I would be like, girl, just jump, just do it. I'd be like, meet me at the top of the
No, I
bridge.
know. Especially when you put it together because you're bouncing the luteal off of each other.
I know.
You're like, me too. I'm like, oh no. Yeah. I'm glad this is perfect timing. But I do agree. That would be an amazing idea to do a documentary. I think that's really I've
Great. Well,
literally
you're in
been
now.
saying I've literally been saying like there needs to be more visibility with this. Like I really feel like if more people were like if this was more well known, then more people would be invested in getting mechanisms that could help the symptoms. Like because then you would see it more. Like if it's not they can't see it, the world can't see it, so they can't help. You know what I mean?
100%. Well, I brought up Oprah to you earlier because
Yeah.
my idea for how I'll pitch this because I pitch other types of shows, but I've never done a documentary. And so my idea is to like do my video, but to Oprah. Like the whole time, I'm just gonna be like Oprah, and then
Yeah.
I'll send it to a bunch of other people. But I do feel like Oprah, like she's so into talking about menopause right now, which is
Yep.
so wonderful, and she's bringing so much attention to menopause, but it's so much more than that. And I
Yeah.
feel like, to be the one to lead that. And, honestly, when the time does come, I will 100% come to you if you'd be interested
Of
to
course.
help. But like we have the extremes of what
Mhm.
happens to every ovulating person, right?
Yes.
Like we know the extreme of it. So what a great place to speak and highlight what's happening, even with somebody with the least amount of PMS symptoms. They're
Yeah.
still going through mood changes and
Yeah.
bodily changes. So I think, yeah, I think it's like, and clearly, look how cute we are, like who doesn't want to listen to us?
That's
While we're in this, while we're in,
I know. You see me in my luteal, I'm gonna have a hood up.
Yeah, that's right. But that's also part of the reality and the yeah, I'm a comedian, so I'm like, that's funny. Like me and you being like, hi everyone, welcome to the show. And then being like, listen, this is where we're at. It's all great.
Well, thank you so much for being on. And this is definitely not the end. We are definitely going to work together in the future. So I really appreciate it. I
Oh my
hope to
gosh,
help you
thank you so much for having me. And thank you for all you do and for all of your vulnerability. You've honestly been a real inspiration for me since I've been following you. And I'm really proud of you and and just everything you do. You're making amazing change. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, until
Bye.
next time, we got this.
Okay, Dr. Rose, thank you. We got this.
I hope this PMDD episode helped you and your partner in your struggles within your relationship. And if this is something that you know that you need help with and you need further support, individualized support, make sure you're going to inlovewithpmdd.com and you're getting those private sessions to really work through what you're going through in your relationship, specifically in regards to PMDD. And also, I want you to leave a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. What this does is it helps other PMDD sufferers and partners find this show that can help them get these free PMDD relationship tools. I remember what it felt like to not know that there were tools out there specifically for PMDD relationships. So I want to make sure that you are sharing these tools with others, share them on your social media, share them with people that you know that are also struggling in their PMDD relationships. Until next episode, this is Dr. Rose, your PMDD relationship psychotraumatologist. One more thing, I almost forgot. I now have the Fresh Start PMDD Partners Workbook. What this workbook can do is if you've had past traumatic experiences with your partner, past fights, past arguments, and they keep coming up every single month in PMDD, I created a Fresh Start Workbook so that you can deal with all of the traumatic experiences that have happened in the past in PMDD rage and all of these things so you can stop going through the same cycle again and again and again. So get that workbook. It comes with a video episode of the actual podcast that I recorded on getting a fresh start in your PMDD relationship. So you're not continuing the same cycle again and again and again. So make sure that you get that workbook. And if you need those individualized counseling sessions, you know where to go, inlovewithpmdd.com. Until next time, we got this. Love you.